Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to Animation Super Basics, the series that, when you think about it, is kind of just like that show Lost. You know, made up as it goes along. Yeah, so this is the 10th episode. It will also be the last one. All right, so in this episode, we're going to be creating this ball scene. You can see the ball is thrown against the wall, and then it bounces off, hits the ground, bounces a couple times, and then rolls off. All right, so let's get started. All right, so let's get started by creating a new composition. We're going to call this main comp. We're going to make this 1920 by 1080, 30 frames per second, and duration of 10 seconds is fine. Hit OK. All right, so now we want to go to our pen tool, and we're going to click up here, shift click down here, and then shift click over here. So now we have our wall and floor, just the basic shape layer. So now what we want to do is go into our assets. Let's take our ball PNG and let's add that into a new composition. Move that over. Let's call this ball PC. All right, and let's go into our main comp here, and let's drag our ball PC down onto it. It's way too big right now, so we can scale it down here. The problem is we're going to be using this scale to do the squash and stretch portion of this tutorial, and we want this to be set to 100%. So what we're going to do is set this back to 100. And we're going to lock this composition up right here by clicking on this. And we're going to double click on our ball PC. So now we have our two comps. We're going to take this ball PC. We're going to click and drag it over up into this corner right here. Release. Now we have a side-by-side view of both of our compositions. So this way we can see how big the ball is going to be in relation to our scene. So let's hit S on the keyboard and let's start scaling this ball down. All right, we'll do something like that, 20%. So now we can actually unlock this and exit out of that. We just need the one comp now. And let's zoom in a whole bunch. And let's click on this little icon here, the region of interest. And let's just make a square. Now we can come in here and let's just move these points so that they're basically on these little squares for the overlay. There we go, just like that. So now what we want to do is come over to Composition, Crop Comp to Region of Interest. Let's click on that. Now our ball is cut down to just what we need, and that's just the ball. So now in Main Comp, we have this nice little composition and scales at 100. So now we're ready to go. So let's take our ball and let's start it off maybe right here. So we're going to hit P for position. We're going to click on the stopwatch for position. Let's go to about 1 second here. Let's move our ball about right here. So now we have our little handles that we can manipulate here. All right, so we want the motion of the ball being thrown kind of up and then down, hitting the wall. All right, so now let's go over to about, I don't know, maybe right there in between 10 and 20. And let's just move this down to about where it would land if it were to bounce off this wall. Let's hold down Alt, click on this handle, and just manipulate that so it looks like it's bouncing off the wall. See what this looks like. Boom. Ah, that's way too fast. Maybe let's bring that over to 20 frames. And that's better. So now let's go to 2 seconds and 10 frames. And let's move this over. For our second bounce, we can go up to our pen tool, convert vertex tool, click on that, manipulate this handle, alt click on this handle, manipulate that one. Let's look at the timing for that. I think these two keyframes should probably move them over. Select this last keyframe, move that over a couple frames, see what that looks like. All right, so for our last movement, we're gonna click, shift, move it over and off screen. Let's take our handle here, kind of bring that maybe move that last keyframe. Let's check out the timing. All right, so for this keyframe, we're going to turn that into an easy ease. And for this last keyframe, we're going to turn that into easy ease in. Maybe we'll add one more. Yeah, I'll add one more bump there. Timing looks a little off for this keyframe. Let's do this. All right, so let's move on to our squash and stretch. But before we do that, actually, let's take our ball PC, hit R for rotation, and let's add some rotation. So we're going to alt click on that stopwatch, do time times, let's try 200. That way it rotates like so. Let's go to our main comp. Let's check out what that looks like. All right, so it's rotating the wrong way. Let's go back to our ball PC and let's add a negative in front of that. And let's change this to 250 because it's also rolling a little too slow. Let's see. There we go. That speed about matches the speed at which it's rolling. All right, that's not too bad. All right, so now let's work on this squash and stretch. All right, so let's hit S on the keyboard. And on our first frame, let's click on the stopwatch to add a keyframe. And let's also hit U so that we can see our actual keyframes here. Now, in between here, we want it to be stretched horizontally and squashed vertically. So X, let's scale that up to maybe, let's say 130. So of course the Y would be 70, as we want to remember to keep the same quote-unquote volume. All right, let's go to where it hits the wall, and let's change this to maybe 60 and 140. So it's really smacking against that wall. And as you can see, our position's now off. So let's just take that, hold down Shift while we click and drag, and we'll drag that right to where it's making contact with the wall. All right, and here maybe we want to do 120 and 80. See what that's looking like. And we want to make this kind of like a bounce back. So let's move this keyframe to maybe about here. And this keyframe, where it's kind of stretched like that, let's bring it closer to this guy. And then here, that's actually pretty good. So let's move the keyframe down so it's touching. Let's set a keyframe for that scale, and let's go over a little bit. Maybe do 100, 100. Here, let's go to 100 and 100. Where it hits here, maybe let's set this to 115 and 85. Let's move this down so it's making contact with the ground here. Let's go over to the middle of this movement here, do 100 and 100. Let's move this keyframe over. Let's make this a easy ease, where it's at 100. Let's take all these keyframes that are at 100. Let's go easy ease. This one in between another movement. Let's go to easy ease. Maybe easy ease this keyframe. Let's play this back. All right, on this position, it's breaking through the floor a little bit, so let's just move that into position. All right, if you want, you can mess around with some of these handles. All right, so the time between here and here might be a little too long. So let's select all these keyframes, starting with these keyframes here. Let's take the last one and let's Alt click and drag in. All right, so as you could probably tell, it's really just a lot of manipulation and looking through it, playing it back, making sure that the movement is kind of believable, which might be. All right, so the key movements that we want to make sure that we have right is the timing between each hit. All right, and we want to make sure that our squash and stretch is going the way, well, it should go. We want to make sure that when it's making contact, it's squashing against the object that it's making contact with. And with those movements, you also want to have kind of like a spring back there, and then it kind of warps back in the shape, and it gets ready for our next point of contact. Boop. Again, we want to make sure that it is making contact. Maybe instead of making this 100 and 100, let's make this 105, 95, just to get a little bit of stretch going on. Whoop, want to do that opposite, 95, 105, and this last one's not going to be as pronounced with that, just because it's not bouncing as hard. So with your squash and stretches, you want to make sure that you kind of get less as it goes along. Maybe make this a little less of a bounce. As you can see, it's a lot of playing it back and just kind of making sure that your movements look believable and that they make sense. Obviously, you don't want to have it hit here and then suddenly bounce this way. Boom. That doesn't make any sense. All right, and where you want to take this kind of animation, the ball is in your court. Maybe take this, make this a little bit shorter. Maybe take the keyframes in between that and move it over a little bit. All right, yeah, like I said, it's all a bunch of manipulation. Just watching it back, making sure that, your movement is steady. All right, maybe the last bit of detail we can add is go into our ball PC. Click on these toggle switches and modes until you see this, and click on the motion blur. So that way we have motion blur on our ball rotating, and then we can come in and do the same for our ball PC. Add our motion blur. All right, and I think that's it for this episode. Let's check. Make sure everything's good. Nope. Making sure that everything's making contact where it should be making contact. All right, so this has been the last episode of Animation Super Basics. Now I could go on for hours showing you how to absolutely perfect this. But I feel like I've given you enough that you can go out on your own and, work through this and get it to look perfect. Because it looks decent right now. But you, as the future animator, should really spend some time, just a lot of time, manipulating things, seeing like maybe if I move this to, maybe if I move this keyframe to an easy ease, I don't know, or even like easy ease out, so it hits. These little subtle changes can actually influence how well your animation looks, how good your animation looks. All right, so like I said, just kind of work through this. Do your best to make it look absolutely perfect. All right. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.